Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we are about to hopefully finish up this 2024 season, our first year as general manager of the Athletics. We're just past the trade deadline, and our A's, shockingly, are only one game behind the Yankees and the Red Sox for the final two wildcard spots in the American League. The A's, who, as those of you who are baseball fans know, and I'm assuming most people watching this are baseball fans, are anticipated to be one of the worst teams in baseball this year, and are also in perhaps the most toxic situation in terms of the relationship between ownership and the fans of any team that I can think of in recent memory. So the fact that we've got them at 55 and 55 has been a very pleasant surprise. We're actually somehow ranked 11th out of 30 in the last power rankings, which maybe indicates we can actually luck our way into the playoffs. But when I look at the team statistics and I still see that we have the worst offense in the American League and we're 6 games above Pythagorean expectations, there is part of me that thinks this is going to fall apart a bit over these final couple months of the season. My original goal was just to avoid 100 losses this season. We're now only 8 wins away from doing that, so I think we should be fine there. After the first episode, my goal was to maybe get this team to 70 wins after we got off to a decent start this year, and I think that is still very achievable. Do I think we're going to be 500 at the end of this episode when the season ends? I don't, and by logic from that, I also don't think we're also going to ultimately end up in the playoffs, but I think it's been a fun ride. Really appreciate those of you who have jumped in and embraced this series. Before I get started, just want to kind of give a shout out to some of the other people who do videos like this that I really enjoy watching. I've been putting out videos at such a stupid, in some ways, pace recently that I don't necessarily get to watch or interact with their channels as much as I would like to. But since there's a lot of new viewers to our channel in these recent days, and some of you may be new to OOTP or new to the genre, some of the other YouTube channels that I find very helpful are PF Holden and Sporer, who are two of the veterans in the space. If you found my channel, odds are you've probably found theirs as well. I could say the same thing about Sergeant Mushroom. Around the World Sports is a great channel that does videos very similar to mine that I watch less frequently today than I used to, but still enjoy very much. And then Avgardian Gaming and Sportsman Z are a couple other channels that I do enjoy watching when I have time to see what they're putting out there. So if you're looking for more OOTP content, those are a few suggestions. I'm sure I've forgotten some that are also very good channels, so apologies in advance to those that I may not have mentioned. It's nothing personal. It's a limit of my rapidly aging brain. And even though we're not really trying incredibly hard to win this year, we have made a couple trades as we approached the trade deadline. Brought on Taylor Rogers from San Francisco, and they're retaining big chunk of his salary this year and next year, so he'll likely be with us the next couple of seasons as a hopefully productive left-handed arm out of our bullpen. And then in our everyday lineup, we did add Omar Narvaez from the Mets very recently. He'll be taking over as our starting catcher against right-handed pitching, and we will be sliding Shea Langeliers into a role where he is starting at catcher only against left-handed pitching. Didn't have to give up any significant prospects or take on any significant money in either of those deals, so as much as I'm I'm not going to be heartbroken if we end up with a losing record this season and we end up missing the playoffs, because those were certainly my expectations going into the season. I figured the team has performed very well over the first 4 months of the season. Might as well do what we can on the margins to see if maybe this Oakland A's team can shock the world even more over these last couple months of the season. And we may finally be coming down to earth. A 3-6 start to the month. We lost a series against the Dodgers. We did win a series against the White Sox, but then we were just swept 3 games in Toronto. We've got the Mets on the road, and then a long homestand against the Giants, Rays, and Brewers before we go on the road at Cincinnati and at Texas to finish up this month of August. See if we can maintain sight of 500, although it's 3 games under. I think this is about as bad as we've been all year. Definitely have slipped down to third, 14 games out in the division. And in the wild card, we're now 2.5 behind the Rangers for the final spot, with the Yankees in between us and the Royals and the Tigers tied with us at 2.5 back. So we are definitely finally beginning to perhaps slip a bit out of the playoff race. I can't say I'm shocked, but we'll see how these last 6 or 7 weeks of the season end up going. And the season's beginning to spiral for our A's. We lost 4 out of 5 games this week. Rain out in there as well. So taking a look at the standings now, 59-65, 17.5 games out in the division. And we are only 2 games out of the final wild card spot, as some of the teams, the Red Sox and the Yankees in front of us, have really been struggling. But still going to need to play much better. Esteury Ruiz leading the AL with 46 steals at this point, and he is the only Oakland A on the leaderboard in the prominent categories for the American League at this point. And the A's are still lurking. We swept a 4-game homestand against the Rays before losing 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee. Now we're headed on the road for the final 5 games of the month before September roster expansion. And we're only half a game out of the final wild card spot. Looks like it's possible that a team with a losing record is going to have the final wild card spot in the AL this year. If you don't need a winning record to get in, I guess we've got a chance, right? And Esteury Ruiz may end up coming just short in his goal of leading the league in steals this year. Going to be out for about 1 to 2 weeks with a bruised wrist. Given that he's only 2 up on Blanco from the Red Sox, it's conceivable that he may get passed in that category over the next couple of weeks while he's healing up. And we're going to bring up Kike Hernandez to replace him. Signed him in a minor league free agent back in May. And he's spent some time in AA and AAA with us this year. Has hit reasonably well at both levels. We'll see what the veteran can do holding down the position for us the next couple of weeks until Ruiz is back. And a rough week for us as we head into September roster expansion. We've just lost now backup catcher Langeliers for likely the rest of the year. Going to be out for 5 to 6 weeks with a sprained ankle. And we also did not play particularly well in that last week of August, losing 4 games in a row on the road at this point. Final game versus Texas today. And then we've got a homestand against Seattle and Detroit. We have avoided the 100-loss season, getting to 65 wins, 5 away from getting to 70. But the chance of this team having a winning record is definitely slipping away at this point. And we're only 2 games out of the wild card spot. It's a good thing that that 3rd wild card spot in the American League is kind of a disaster. But in the month of August, definitely came down to earth. A 10-16 record, by far our worst record for a month this season. And you can see that at 65 wins, we're now 10 ahead of Pythagorean expectations. We're still last in the American League in runs scored. And our pitching staff has been struggling of late, particularly our starters, who now have the worst ERA in the American League. And we're 10th overall in runs allowed. Clark Schmidt, J.P. Sears, and Mitch Spence, I guess along with Kyle Muller, are all kind of hanging in there. But Paul Blackburn with that 4-16 record and 6.36 ERA is not making a very strong case to return with us next year. Taylor Rogers, you can see, only pitched 5 innings, is a setup man for a team that's losing a lot of games, not getting a ton of opportunities, and he hasn't been great in that very small sample size for us. But we've made it to September. We're going to need to find a new backup catcher. Presumably, we'll just be likely bringing up Trey Barrera, although there is a chance that we could bring Tyler Soderstrom back up. He did a real nice job for us in AAA before he injured his ACL. We've had him back in AAA, or in AA. I might have said that wrong. We've had him in AAA for the last few weeks after he got healthy. Has not hit much there. Really think he's ultimately going to be more of a first baseman, DH, left fielder type if his bat develops enough. Don't think we really want him behind the plate, but we're going to have some interesting decisions to make to round out this roster. We're able to add 4 more players, and interesting in seeing how perhaps some younger guys can do over this last month of the season. And we brought up 2 pitchers and 2 position players. Scott Efros, who we picked up in that trade with the Yankees that basically let us get Austin Adams off the books, was in AAA for us. Didn't do a particularly good job there, but interested in seeing what he can do at the major league level, because he could be in the mix for our roster next year. And then Ken Waldachuk started the year on the IL, came back briefly on a rehab assignment, got hurt again, and was completing a second rehab assignment in AAA. Interested in seeing what the lefty can do at the major league level. He'll be 27 this offseason, so kind of time to figure out whether he is part of our long-term plans with the A's or not. And we brought up 2 position players for September call-ups. Tyler Nevin, who was with the major league team earlier this year, only hit a $157 for us, but he did do a respectable job down in AAA, so he's back with us. And then we also brought up Lawrence Butler, who will be back in the majors for the first time since last year. Spent the whole year this season in AAA Las Vegas, hit .284, 23 homers, 22 steals. Was still a slightly above average or slightly below average offensive player when all was said and done, which is a little bit surprising given the numbers he put up. But Pacific Coast League, there tends to be some offense historically. We're going to put him right in at center field against right-handed pitchers. He's younger than Kike Hernandez, possibly part of our future. We would have loved to see what Daryl Hernandez could do. He had a really nice year for us in AAA, ended up hitting .317, but he's been out for 3 weeks now with a strained hammy, and he's going to miss the rest of the season, unfortunately. We've been trying to get him a little more versatile in terms of the positions he can play down in AAA this year. He spent some time playing first base and left field for us. Certainly think with the bat that he has shown over the last year and a half at the AAA level that he will probably be on the 26-man roster for us next year. A little bit of a bummer that we won't get to see him in a September call-up this time around. And Eschery Ruiz is ready to come back off of the IL. You can see he's now tied for the league lead in steals with Blanco. So Blanco's only picked up 2 while he's been gone. Our A's are 16 back in the division. Magic number for the Mariners down to 9. Not that we're thinking it's realistic that we would get by both them and the Rangers. And we are half a game behind the Red Sox for the last wild card spot. So we are a team that will not die. And at this point, we're only one win away from getting to that 70 win total that we felt would represent pretty significant progress from the 50 win team that the A's were in 2023. And we just lost Zach Jackson for the year to a torn labrum that's likely going to cost him most of next year. He had a 4.38 ERA with 84 strikeouts and 74 innings pitched, so a respectable year for us. 98 ERA plus, 103 FIP minus. Given that he's set to head to arbitration this offseason and make $1.4 million, and we're unlikely to see him until August next year, I tend to think that he has thrown his last pitch for the Oakland Athletics. And we've gotten to our 70 wins on the year, 73 and 77 record. Ruiz has pulled ahead of Blanco in the stolen base race in the AL. None of our other players on the leaderboard. And we're still only one game behind the Yankees and the Red Sox for that final wild card spot. Detroit is tied with us, so basically 4 teams at this point fighting for those final 3 or the final 1 wild card spot in the AL. I guess if Texas came back to earth, that's another team in the mix as well. Looks like we're all but certain to beat the Angels and the Astros in the standings this year, which is definitely a big surprise. 73 and 77. So as I mentioned, we've got our 70 wins. We're probably not going to get to 80. Taking a look at the standings, we just took a look at the standings. Taking a look at the schedule would be more interesting to do right now. We've got the Cubs, followed by a big homestand against the Yankees, and then we finish off with 3 at home against Texas, and then 3 on the road at Seattle to conclude the season this year. Those 3 games against the Yankees could be critical, especially if we can take 2 out of 3 in Wrigley. Those games might actually mean something for a playoff spot, which is pretty incredible for these Oakland A's. And we did our job in Chicago, taking 2 out of 3 on the road. Unfortunately, we lost 2 out of 3 against the Yankees. Playing 500 ball at this point is not going to be quite enough to get us where we need to be. 6 games to go, a 76 and 80 record. Taking a look at the standings, we're now 3 games out of the final wild card spot after losing 2 out of 3 to the Yankees. Clearly, if we had swept that series, we'd be only a game behind the Yankees at this point. But they are finally surging, winning 9 of their last 10. We're the only team that's beaten them over the last week and a half or so. And their record is above 500 at this point. So we are now, along with the Detroit Tigers, the closest teams to being eliminated from the playoff race. We've got 3 against Texas. Certainly, they are in a battle with the Yankees also for that second and third wild card spot, and they're still in jeopardy. Certainly wouldn't mind doing well against Texas and helping to spoil their season. And we did drop 2 out of 3 at home against Texas. So at 77 and 82, we have clinched a losing season, although we're going to be at least 27 games better than a year ago. So we still made some decent progress. Now eliminated from the playoffs as well, 4 games back, along with the Tigers and the Red Sox, with just 3 games left to play. So at this point, we are only playing for pride and playing to see if Mr. Ruiz will end up leading the American League in stolen bases this season. And the regular season is over. We ended up getting swept on the road in Seattle in the final series of the season. So kind of as expected, this A's team, I don't want to say completely imploded down the stretch, but 55 and 55 at the start of this episode, which means that we went 22 and 30 down the stretch, barely playing 400 ball, which is more what probably would have expected from this team at the beginning of the season. Taking a look at the team statistics, we still got extremely lucky to even get to 77 wins. Pythagorean expectations were 66 and 96, so we were plus 11. So very lucky. You can see we were plus 11 in one-run games, going 32 and 21. So that's a big piece of the puzzle for us. We were a 500 team against right-handed starters, but 18 and 27 against lefty starters this year. Certainly maybe adding a solid right-handed bat or two would be something for us to think about doing in the off-season this year. Did bounce back from that really poor August with a simply mediocre September at 12 and 14. Ended up 15th in the American League in runs scored. And you can see here we were last in almost every offensive category. And the pitching staff definitely struggled in the second half of the year as well. 11th in runs allowed. And you can see we were towards the bottom of the league in a lot of pitching categories when all was said and done. So the surprisingly good pitching staff that we had in the first half of the year didn't really persist over the second half of the season, and that ended up costing us. So the good news is we made a lot of progress. As I mentioned, this was a 50-win team in 2023. We improved by 27 games, and even if you look at the fact we only should have been 66 and 96, that's still a 16-game improvement from where this team was a year ago. Presumably that 77 and 85 record and our goal to not suck completely is going to make Mr. Fisher happy when we get to the off season. Taking a look at the playoffs, which are going to be beginning today. In the American League, the Guardians and the Mariners won the divisions. Rangers, Twins, Yankees, and Orioles all in the wildcard series. The Dodgers and the Braves, not surprisingly, the division winners with the best records in the National League. Cardinals, Cubs, Phillies, and Brewers also in the playoffs here in 2024. Ruiz did end up leading the American League in stolen bases with 54. Just as importantly, perhaps even more importantly, he was caught only 8 times, so he was very efficient on the base paths for us. And he is the only member of the A's who shows up on the leaderboards. And taking a look at the playoffs, the Dodgers and the Braves, as expected, facing off in the National League Championship Series. The Guardians, with the best record in the American League, are facing off against the wild card Yankees in the ALCS, and the Guardians just one game away from a long-awaited return to the World Series. And we've made it to the start of international amateur free agency. First look, looks like there's some interesting pitchers out there, and it also looks like there is a plethora of interesting batters out there. So we're going to figure out which 10 of these very highly regarded prospects we'd like to bring into camp and start the initial planning for how we might try to bring on some help for our team, because we certainly could use some additional depth and additional quality in our minor league system. And it's going to be the Guardians and the Braves in the World Series. The Yankees surged back, winning games 4, 5, and 6, but the Guardians avoided the Yankees finally getting revenge for 2004 by taking Game 7. And the Braves took out the Dodgers 4-2. So it's the Braves and the Guardians in the World Series. The Guardians 97 and 65. The Braves were 95 and 67 this season. And your World Series champions in 2024 are the Cleveland Guardians. They faced a full 5-game series against the Twins and a 7-game LCS against the Yankees and a 7-game World Series against the Braves. But they won the deciding game in every series they played this year. And the Guardians are your World Series champions. Got some option decisions to make. Scott McGuff decided not to opt out of his contract, but that leaves us with an option year decision for him. We'll probably be moving on from him. He had a nice year for us, but $4 million may be a bit rich for a reliever. Our budget, $118 million, so I think that's a decent improvement from where we were a year ago. Goal, once again, is to not suck completely, upgrade at catcher, find a top 20 prospect, build a top 6 minor league system, increase fan interest, more IA, FA fines, and reach the playoffs in the next 4 seasons. So not particularly ambitious. Was a little concerned that 77 and 85 record might have Mr. Fisher expecting us to do more than that this year and perhaps be a 500 team in the 2025 season. But it seems like despite all of his faults, he's at least somewhat realistic. We can start thinking about our development facilities. And when we take a look at the finances, it's a $18 million boost to our budget, 18% improvement. We're going to put a positive spin on things. So we're moving in the right direction. Should have some more money to play with next year. Also going to hopefully put ourselves into a situation where we we'll be able to invest a little more in scouting and player development. We've already turned over most of our coaching staff, so that's not going to be a concern. Won't have those sunk costs that we incurred this year when we fired just about everybody at the start of the season. So all things said, 77 and 85 I think is definite progress for Oakland. I think we might be hard-pressed to win 77 games next year in 2025, given the extent to which we outperformed expectations, but we're also going to have a full off season to use the trade market, the free agent market, the Rule 5 draft, and every other avenue at our means, maybe some international free agents. Who knows? There might even be someone from the independent leagues that looks like they could help us. We're going to be turning over every stone this off season to try to figure out how to position the A's even better for 2025 and into the future. In our next episode, we'll take a look back at the roster for this year and start walking through our initial thoughts on some of the many decisions that we're going to need to make, because probably going to be a lot of turnover this offseason on this Oakland A's team. Hopefully we'll make the right decisions, and we'll find out what decisions we think we're going to need to focus on in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.